So the theory I want to put up is very simple. So there's two actors. There's a supervisor, call him a bureaucrat, and participants in the economy, we'll call them the agents. Okay? And this theory is going to be very general. They're going to be, we're just going to call them slots, and I'm going to later describe what the slots are and make them more concrete. But for a moment, let's just think of them as slots. And there are a set of slots of total size 1 that need to be allocated to a population of size n greater than 1. Okay, so not everybody gets a slot. That's the key point. Okay. There's two types of agents, high types and low types, with NH high types and L low types. And your types are private information. That means I know my type as the agent, but the bureaucrat does not know my type. And for a given type, capital H, let's define the social benefit of giving the slot to a capital H person as capital H. Okay, so this is kind of how much economic performance or economic efficiency is gained on net for society by giving the slot to an H type. The H type gets a personal benefit, little h. Those aren't the same, right? So in my example, in the example of the rent seeking before, right? Imagine that imagine that society might not care. Imagine that there's sort of what's an example? Here's an example. Imagine I pull out a $20 bill, and so I'm going to give the $20 bill to one person in this class. Okay, the private benefit to each of you from getting that $20 bill is $20. The social benefit is unchanged, regardless of who I give the private benefit to, but the $20 bill to. That's not a totally good example, but you'll see what I mean. But the private benefit is how much I value the thing personally. And my ability to pay for the slot is YH, which is strictly less than little h. It's strictly less than the amount that obviously I'm not going to pay more than I value the thing, but I might, if I don't have enough money, if I'm credit constrained, I might pay less. And so we can just define the same values for the L types. Okay, so the goal, assume without loss of generality that big H is greater than big L. Okay, so we'll define the high types to be the ones that we'd like to give the slot to for society. But then all the other little h's and the y's could be any which way, right? And there's 4 combinations, right, of which one's bigger or smaller. Okay, but the goal is to sort of give the slots to the H types. So I want to focus on 2 kind of cases. So you can imagine that this generates a 2-by-2 matrix, right? Remember, the society always wants to give the slots to the big H people, or to the H types. So this generates so if I put, well, which case are we in? Are we in the little h is bigger than L, or little h is less than or equal to L? And same for the YHs, right? That generates a 2-by-2, 4 combinations. And I'm going to focus on these 2 cases, okay? Because I think they're the most interesting. Okay. So case 1 is an example that you might think of as like the road procurement example. Okay? Right, in the example that we talked about before about like, was there corruption? So imagine the type H people are the more efficient contractors. They can build the road for a lower cost. Now for the same contract, sort of holding the price fixed, right, they're going to make more money. And therefore their value of getting the contract is going to be greater, right, because they're going to get more money. Right, so little h is going to be greater than little l. And since they're the ones who are going to get paid, in some sense, how much they're willing to pay above for a fixed contract price is going to be exactly equal to they're willing to pay sort of up to their profits. So it's also going to be, so YH is going to be equal to H, and YL is going to be equal to L, and it's also going to be, therefore, if H is greater than L, then YH is greater than YL. Okay? Is that example clear? It's all a bit abstract, but is it clear what I'm trying to get at? So what the key thing here is now, suppose we're in a world where we think that, going back to your point, we think everyone is corrupt. Let's not think about heterogeneity and corruption here. Suppose we think everyone's corrupt, and the bureaucrat now is willing to sell the slots. Right? The bureaucrat says, I'm having an auction, pay me for the slots. Right? That's one view of corruption. What's going to happen? Well, what's going to happen is, if everyone's willing to pay, okay, then the people who are going to pay the most are the people with the highest valuation. you're going to transfer a lot of profits. The profits, instead of the private firm getting the profits, it's going to be the bureaucrat who's going to get the profits. But society is still going to pick the right person to give the slots to. Is that clear? Now we can actually also think about the example you raised before of having some honest people and some dishonest people in the same model. So what would happen? How would we think about that? So in the example before, we would still have that little h is greater than little l. Okay. But if some people are honest and unwilling to pay, and those are the high types, we would be in the case over here where yh is less than yl. Right? And now you might get the wrong outcome. Okay? But I think the key point of this is, in these kinds of examples where sort of your willingness to pay a bribe is in general correlated with sort of the amount society wants you to get the thing anyway, corruption is going to be about moving rents around, moving sort of fixed payments around, and could it really affect kind of who's rich and who's poor in society? But it's not going to affect as much overall economic efficiency. Okay, and that's the point of this framework, this setup.